So we're given this blank class, this circle object class, and then we're given these instructions. Sorry about my voice for the quality of the video, by the way. This is my first time ever doing anything like this. So, see how this goes. So the instructions say you need to create a getter and a setter for the radius. So that's your accessor and mutator. Um, I recommend while you're watching this video to take notes on some of the terms I give you because these terms will come up a lot. I'll link my notebook in the description of this video, and the I'll link the script that I wrote for this video because I typed it out already. There's a text tutorial already done. I'm just visualizing it. So excuse me if I'm rambling. If you really don't want to listen to me yap, you can just watch the text tutorial and then skip around to the parts. I'll try my best to have it as organized as possible. But no promises. We have to create a getter and setter for the radius. We have to create a calculate area method. We have to create a calculate circumference method. And we have to create a default constructor. I'm going to talk about the default constructor thing in a bit because it kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I saw that as part of the instructions, and I'll explain why later. So we can infer that we will need. The first thing is an instance variable. And based on the other two methods where we're calculating things, we can safely assume we're doing math. So for that, we kind of want to use a double. We could use something like an int, like an integer. We could use an int, we could use a float. But the thing with double is that it's nice because we're probably going to be multiplying by pi, and pi is a really big number, and sometimes with something like float, that causes rounding errors, and we want to avoid that. So we're going to do double radius, and since this is an instance variable, we want to make it private, because only this class should be able to access this variable. We don't want other classes to access it. The only way it should be accessed is through our accessor and mutator, which is our getter and setter, which will be in a couple steps. But next we got to make the constructor. Now they want a default constructor. A default constructor is a very easy thing to do. Every object has a default constructor by definition. It's just part of the Java programming language. And as you can see, it's just public circle, the name of the class, or the name of the object, and then empty parentheses, and then you just close the brackets. And that's it. That's your default constructor. I'll explain why this works. So if you don't know, Java is an object-oriented programming language, and some of the main concepts of the programming, like of an object-oriented, like OOP programming paradigm, some of the main concepts is encapsulation and abstraction. Basically what that means is, you know how you have in math, if you took some higher level math classes like calculus or even advanced, like stuff past that, or like discrete math, you get introduced to the concept of mathematical proofs, generalizations, and abstractions. Coding, it works the same way. So in an object-oriented programming language, when you're programming, you kind of want to generalize everything. So I'll talk about this later when I get to something called the solid principles. But basically, you want every class or every object in Java to follow the set of principles. And part of those principles is that everything should have only one purpose. Everything should be open to being extended, but closed to being actually like mutated. So you don't want like a bunch of interfaces or classes where you have to change a bunch of stuff for it to work. It should just be extensible. So it's like, for example, quick example, you have a car object, or hold on, you have a vehicle object, and then you want to make a car, and then that extends the vehicle class. So that means whatever methods are in here, so like say this has got like get speed, this will also have that get speed. This will also have that get speed method by default, but then you can add other methods like open back door or open trunk, you know? These methods would be specific to the car because not every vehicle has these methods. This is just a very crude example, but hopefully that drives the point home. Obviously, I'm going to try my best to explain this, and I'm also going to link my notebook in the description so you guys can look at my notes and try to follow along that way. Okay, so we got our default constructor done. So now we're going to make our constructor that takes a parameter. Now this is not part of the instructions. However, I really think it would be really good practice to include this because I talk about this in the text tutorial version of this video, but basically when you're creating objects in Java, it's best practice to like whenever you instantiate them. So when you instantiate a new object, you do new circle, whatever, blah blah blah, right? Or new scanner, right? And then you put a system in, and that just tells this the scanner class that you're using the system in as an input, and that's what it should be using to scan, like actually scan. So it's really good practice to just whenever you make an object, it should be ready to be used as soon as you create it. You know, you shouldn't have to like use mutator methods to change its state. I mean, they're good to have because you will need them, but it's best if you can just create them and just readily use them. There will be cases where a default constructor is smart to have or like a good design choice, but those cases for now are you're nowhere near them. Okay, like you would probably use the default constructor for something like a calculator class or something where you're not really changing any of the variables because it doesn't have variables. You're just kind of just creating an instance of it just to use the methods. But we're also going to talk about static methods later and why with static methods you don't even have to do that either. But I'm gonna get ahead of myself, so back to this. We're gonna work on our accessor and mutator. So an accessor is just a get method, getter method. So we're just gonna do since we want other classes to use it, we're gonna have a public access modifier, and we want it to return the radius. So for the data type, we're gonna return a double, and then we're gonna call it get radius. And in Java, we use camel case for methods. There's a whole list of naming conventions and like best practice. I also have notes on it if you want to look at it, but we just use camel case. Camel case is like when it's like, oh, this is camel case where you capitalize the first letter of every word after the first word, and the first word is all lowercase. So this we're just going to return radius. Okay. And then for the next one, we want to make a setter, right? So for this one, we're not returning anything, we're changing something. So it's going to have a void return type because we don't want it to return anything. And it shouldn't return anything. So set radius. And then inside the parentheses, we want to pass the new radius. We're going to call it R. And we're going to open that up. And then in the method body, we're going to do this dot radius equals R. So that is a colon, not a dot. So let me explain what this does. So this keyword means that this variable, you see it highlighted, we're talking about this instance variable. And then whatever, so like see if I highlight that, it only highlights that. That's the only variable it's talking about. So nothing else in this class uses it. So this set radius doesn't use that variable that the user inputs or the developer inputs. This object only relies on this one radius variable, which is the instance variable. So when we set the radius with this method, whatever we pass through here will set this variable to equal that. Okay. So, and it doesn't care what we preset the method as. Okay, so moving on to the calculate circumference method, we know that the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, right? Where r is radius. So we wanted to return a double because we're doing math, right? So we're going to do public double calculate circumference. And we're not passing anything to it because we don't need to. And then there's a couple ways to do this. We're just going to keep it really simple. There is more advanced ways of doing this. For example, you can have default methods and parameterized methods where I can pass a new radius to this, and the new radius will change the radius of the class and then calculate the circumference all dynamically. There's a lot of ways to design this class, but we're just going to keep this very simple. So we're going to just return 2, and then we're going to multiply it by radius, and we're going to multiply that by math.pi. Okay, and that should return this circumference. Okay. Now we're going to do the same for the area. And then we're going to return for the area, the equation is pi r squared. So we're going to do math.pi, pi, and capitalization is very important in Java, by the way. Make sure everything matches case, and or else your code won't work. Okay, so we have math.pi. Okay, we're going to use the math class again. I'm going to use the pow function, which just means power. And it takes 2 doubles. So double A, double B. So the first one, A, is what is the radix. I think that's what it's called, the base of the exponent. And then we're gonna, the base is what you're multiplying with, right? Anyways, it's whatever number you're gonna multiply by an exponent. And then for the second double integer float, it could literally be anything. For the second one, we're gonna put the power, so it's gonna be squared, so we're just gonna put 2.0, or you can just put 2, doesn't matter. And then don't forget the semicolon. I'm gonna close that off, and then this should return area. Okay. And finally, for the last part, we're just gonna make a new 2-string method, 2-string method, and then they're just gonna return radius, and then we're just gonna get radius. Okay. So this object class is done. We did everything. This is very simple. It's just that easy. Okay, so now for the main method. We have an empty main class. We do our main method, public static void main string array args. Okay. And then we're going to make our new circle object. So we're going to do circle, and then we're going to call this circle 1. I don't like how long that is. We're going to do C1. And then we're going to do new circle, and we're not going to instantiate it with the radius. I'm going to use our default constructor. And then we're going to make another circle. I'm going to do circle 2 equals new uh, circle, and then this one we are gonna put a constructor in it. We're gonna set this radius to 10. Okay, so now we have two circles. So now I want to look at the two circles. So if you don't, so the problem with the default constructor is right now this circle class doesn't have a radius because we never set one. So that means the radius is null. So if I were to do something like get radius for the circle one, and I try to run it, I'm gonna get an error. Oh, I actually didn't get an error. I got 0, which is interesting because usually that's supposed to throw an error. That's supposed to throw a null exception because there's nothing there, but I guess it just defaults to the default value, which is just 0. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not what I wanted to show for the tutorial, but I guess it's fine. You know, type safety, Java's been getting better at that with the new updates, and this is the latest version, so that makes sense why that happened. But kind of sucks because I was trying to teach what happens when you don't set variables. So now we're gonna set the radius to something. So we're gonna set it to 5. Okay. And now we're gonna run the same method again. And now we should get a different answer. So before it was 0. So now it should be, yep, 5. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, and I'm not gonna do the same things for this second one. I want you guys to play around with it. Just for time's sake, I'm just gonna work with one of these instances, but I really encourage you guys to play around with this, see what you can do. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with Java, and honestly, you only get better at it if you try making your own things. I feel like a learning environment is not very conducive. A structured learning environment is not very conducive to learning any programming language. In my personal opinion, I feel like the best way of learning a language is by practicing it, playing around with it, making your own personal stuff, trying to achieve your own goals, and then learning along the way through a series of Googles and looking at Stack Overflow and asking ChatGPT. I think that's the best way to learn any language. Okay, so continuing on, we want to calculate the circumference. So we're going to do sout, or system out, and then we're going to do circumference of circle 1, and then we're going to do C1 dot calculate circumference. Sorry, excuse me. And then we're going to do the same for area. Okay. Now, if you run this, okay, as we see, I believe that's correct if I pull out my calculator. Area is pi r squared, so 3.14 times, we said the radius is what, 5? Yeah, we said it equals to 5, and then we're going to square that. So, yeah, that's right. And then I'm not going to check circumference because if the area is right, then the circumference is right. Okay, so now we want to use our set radius method again. And then we're going to set it to 10 this time. And then now that we set it to 10, we can repeat these two methods. And then we're going to see how the output changes. So we're going to put this 2 so we know that we changed the radius, just for debugging sake. And we're going to run this. And it works. So if you see here, our first radius is 5, the circumference is that, and there is that. And then now we change the radius to 10, and the circumference doubled, which is what should happen. And the area is also good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys play around with it, see what you can do, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll be putting the link to my notes in the description, and there will also be contact info there for you guys to get in touch with me and ask questions, or just in the comments. All right, thank you, and I hope to see y'all in the next one.